Ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is David Clues and I'm one of the co-founders of Unity News Network along with Carol Pearson. We are one of the fastest growing, new, vibrant news networks in the United Kingdom. On YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Vimeo, we're on our own website. We have a favour to ask of you, ladies and gentlemen. Do you believe in real news? Are you sick or a part? And help us continue to grow. We've got a current affairs correspondent. We've got more correspondents ready to come. We're going to keep producing content, but only with your support. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking your help. I'm asking you for a favour. Please join with us, enjoy our content, and let's really create something here. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. David Clues, Unity News Network, joined by the indomitable Mr. Nigel Howitt. Nigel, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Good evening to you, David. I'm very well, thanks. And you?
Yep, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I see the comments coming in. Everybody just tell me that everything's fine with the audio. Just pop the questions in the side. So, Nigel, for people that don't know you, tell us a bit about you, please.
Well, I'm Lawful Rebel is my website, and I suppose I am a lawful rebel. That's who I am. I'm living outside the matrix, and it's essentially a mission to uncover truth in an age of I call it the sort of disinformation soup. There's loads of stuff going out there. There's propaganda, there's fake news, there's great information on the internet. And the trick is to sift the wheat from the chaff to find out what's true. So the whole mission is that in order to do that, we need to think. So my whole gig is around thinking and finding solutions. And there are so many problems with thinking. The more you look into it, it's a fascinating topic. But to cut a long story short, that's really the essence of it, I think, the solution.
Nigel, thanks again for coming on. The comments say that the audio is fine, so we're set up and we're good to go. So Nigel first approached me to come on and discuss the Lisbon Treaty, and it was extremely interesting. And obviously, we're returning the favour now to get Nigel on and listen to what he has to say, because Nigel's a very interesting person. Nigel, you were a former pilot, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, David. I worked for 25 years as an airline pilot. It was great fun, but I always knew that there was something a little bit more that I had to be doing, and I stopped flying in 2014 and became, blogger, YouTuber, as previously described. So yeah, it was a good career to come from in some respects, because one of the sort of guidelines of the training system is to always be mindful. What's the most important thing I should be doing now? Whatever situation of flight you're in when you're flying an airplane, what is the most important thing I should be doing now? So you're constantly prioritizing. And I found that a useful sort of carryover to sort of guide what I do today.
Nigel, is the world flat or is it round?
I like this. I'm personally convinced that it's round.
Okay.
I've seen the shape of things from 41,000 feet, and from all of my knowledge, not just the direct perceptual evidence of my senses, but also the many, many theories that are explained by a globular theory of the planet. So yeah, I say it's round.
There is a huge flat Earth community now on YouTube. Do you ever come across it? Sandy says
I do,
it's flat.
David. Yeah, I do come across this, and I was meeting a few people this weekend that hold that view. I consider it an interesting issue, because I think it's very important for people to, again, know what is the most important thing I should be doing now, and we have to try and spot what might be a red herring, what might be a little rabbit hole that you can get lost down to no avail. And if we think about, even if you did prove that the Earth was flat, and you can't, where's it going to get you? Are you going to be further along? And after all the hours that you can spend looking into these subjects, I looked into it for a couple of hours because I was interested to hear the arguments. But we have to ask ourselves whether or not we're actually achieving a result. And the answer is, I think it's a great big red herring. It's like talking about Nibiru. It's like, any of these things. We have to quickly assemble, what we can construct as the facts, get the full context, find out all the information. And we have to quickly sort of move on, I think, from one issue to another. And this is one of the characteristics of the modern day lawful rebel, the modern day truth seeker, is that we have to be mentally nimble on our toes and spot patterns rather than getting stuck into isolated, concrete examples of the problem. Are you with me?
I totally agree and get that. And it's interesting because I think the flat earth thing comes from, if you haven't seen it with your own eyes, then you can't believe it. But you obviously have seen it with your own eyes. So are you part of the conspiracy? That's the other question. Are you part of it?
Well, it's interesting you said that you have to see it with your own eyes. You could argue that the whole flat earth idea is the ultimate subjectivism, which is, it's only real if I can see it or if I think it and believe it. But it's not just a question that I've seen visual evidence. The front windows of a jet airliner are such that your vision is undistorted. But it's also the numerous principles about our Earth that explain it. The whole thing with the weather cycles, the whole thing about sort of gases rising, the whole thing about trajectory, gravity, projectiles, flight. There are just the way we move. The theory of gravity. There are so many things and principles that are explained by a globular Earth hypothesis, and that would leave as many questions unanswered by the flat Earth idea. So it's just a non-starter. And again, I think it's a question of spotting whether or not there's a goal at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? If you come out the other side of that tunnel a bit older than you went in, have you come away with something? And there's so many really important issues out there to grapple with. One of the most important ones, I think, for example, is the health issue. And you and your listeners, I'm sure, are very familiar that health is becoming an increasingly talked about topic, given that we can't go to the doctor to know how to be healthy. And it's an increasingly dangerous world with things like EMFs and bad diet and toxins. So the whole context of today is that it's a dangerous world to live in and not be thinking. And we've got to be careful as we tiptoe around uncovering these truths to not get lost down, lost in a little eddy in the stream and sort of keep going around in circles.
So you had a week just there, and you had, how many people were staying with you?
Yeah, we had the numbers were low. We could have we were catering and up and running for about 100. We had, I think, about 50 people, but it was still, nevertheless, it was a wonderful gig, David, because the flip side. Okay, it's great to have lots of people there and feel that there are lots of people thinking and questioning things and wanting to know. But on the sort of silver lining side, out of 50 people there, you met 49 other people. Do you know what I mean? It was a sort of a weekend where you had 49 other conversations, or 45 or whatever it was. But everybody there connected with everybody else, which was rather lovely. That was just a function of the numbers, I think, more than anything. But also throwing in the interesting topics of conversation, the fact that everybody wants to know, we all want to find out, so lots of ideas were exchanged, and in that atmosphere it's quite a buzz, isn't it? It's quite a buzz. You feel, gosh, there's hope for humanity. So it was good fun.
We've got about 35-40 people on, which is fantastic. Everybody that's coming on, please give this a like, please give this a share, and we're going to talk a bit more about Nigel, because Nigel's a very, very interesting guy in his background and what he's doing and his interest in Brexit. Nigel, what got you interested in Brexit?
I think Brexit strikes right to the heart of the need to be free, and what got me into the whole need to be free. We do need to be free. Some people don't realize it. Not everybody wants to be free, but ultimately, in order to thrive and live the best lives we can, we need to be free. And you and I spoke previously. I don't know how much you want me to touch upon it, but I had an experience where I was living in a nest of yurts. You can see one of the yurts here I'm in at the moment. This is the fourth one. The other three have been taken down. But I had an experience where I was living in a nest of 4 yurts together, and I tested my freedom, you could say. So I began living what I consider to be, a fairly low impact solution version of how we should live on my own piece of land. And it wasn't long before the government came along and had a big problem with what I was doing. And, without going into the full story, I challenged the claim of jurisdiction, but I was crushed and just told to move on. So I came away, the point of that story is that I discovered that I wasn't free. And knowing that the importance of actually being free, a successful human life is one where you're free to act on your own judgment. Everything from when to get up in the morning, what clothes to buy, who to marry, where to live. We value acting on our own judgment, and it's obvious, isn't it? Everyone wants and needs to act on their own judgment, and really the essence of freedom is to be able to do exactly that. So this Brexit idea it hits right at the core of it, because government and criminals are really the only entities that can impinge upon our rights and our freedom with the use of force. With the government, it's legitimate use of force. Obviously, with criminals, it's declared to be illegitimate. But the problem is, do we really need another layer of government? I mean, that's the issue. We have enough of a challenge with our own government being representative and all that. I'm not a big fan of the whole concept of government, I must confess.
So would you say you're an ultra-libertarian?
I suppose that in the truest sense of the word, I'm probably an anarchist. But the key distinction. The key distinction is here that you don't have to make government go away. You can allow everyone that wants and needs to be governed to remain to be governed. But if you could just allow a little crack in the door so that a few people could sneak outside and say, do you know what? I won't be governed, thanks very much, and allow those people to do something over there. I think we would find that alternative way would be amazingly successful, and then everybody would want to sort of change sides. So the usual sort of immediate knee-jerk response to the idea of an anarchist, thinking, oh, you want to get rid of government? How are we going to do that? What we're going to do about the roads and all of that? You don't need to worry about that. All you need to do is, in fact, allow people to not be governed. But that's a little bit of a red herring. So I'm not a big fan of being governed. I think, the enlightened man, the more conscious human can govern himself, and that's what we should aspire to. But the idea of another layer of government and the unaccountability of the European Union, it's just a non-starter, isn't it? The idea of paying money and taxes to a body even further away. And it's just not the direction to go in. I mean, there's a whole load of reasons on there, but that's the broad principle. The broad principle is we want to be in control of our own affairs. We want to strike up whatever trade deals as a nation. We don't want to be told what to do. I mean, and it's a myth that we need to be a part of that union in order to trade. I mean, it's quite the reverse. We can be politically independent, I would say, and trade more effectively.
If people sort of heard your argument, you could look at it one of two ways. You could say it's ultra right in the sense that it's total libertarianism, being on your own, but then on the anarchist side, it's ultra left because it's about community and the people. An interesting thing is, why do you think that the sort of cultural left, who before was very sceptical of the European Union, they didn't like the thought of multinationals, transnational government, why do you think they're so pro-European now?
Yes, why are they so pro-European? I don't know. And again, this comes into, how deep behind the curtain are we reaching to see whose hands on the levers? You know, I'm sure all your readers and listeners, are familiar with propaganda, with spin, with all of this sort of stuff, and most of us know that the mainstream narrative, shall we say, you know, it can be likened in some respects to you know, a Punch and Judy show. Obviously, things happen on the global stage, and they get reported. Obviously, that happens too. But the narrative, the way it's conducted, what is said, what is presumed, and what is not said, all of these things. I mean, there are. It is known that there are moves towards the collectivist idea. For example, you know, we see the loss of freedoms in America. We see, you know, the move to the European superstate, and the collectivism, the socialism basically leads towards collectivism. It's statism. It ultimately ends up collectivism, and it can be shown not to work. It's not as if we don't know. It's not as if Soviet Russia didn't exist, and you know, we don't see the latest example in Venezuela. We know that the socialist idea, it's a form of statism. It's basically, think of a good idea, a policy, and then make everybody do it. And because you see, you have to get really fundamental to get to the root of understanding any of the problems we have in our culture, socialism just being one of them. We have to get right down to the bottom principle, and it's a form of statism, which basically says you have some policies and you force people to do them. So it's the use of force.
I'm just going to jump in very quickly, because there's some really good comments. We've had a bit of a flat Earth argument taking place, so we'll leave that as it is. Someone's saying they're loving the yurt, and then a very good comment. They're scared of being called racist, so they become extreme anti-racists. So I'm going to ask you a tougher question, Nigel. I've been very nice from now. You believe in, you know, individual responsibility, people choosing to opt out. One of the big concerns about voting to leave was mass immigration, and people feel that the government has failed on that duty. So do you not require a strong government or strong institutions to ensure that's enforced? You know, so how does that fit with your idea of removing the sense of government?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that the idea of wishing to be ungoverned is a long-term goal, if you like, to put that into clear perspective. In the short term, I would advocate a strong national government. So my ideal is to take one step backwards from the European superstate, and let's at least focus on one layer of government, our own, to which we can maybe, you know, even hold them to account, and then maybe let's start there. So that's a really important first step. The idea of the whole unaccountability of Europe, and the fact that we are not free to make our own trade deals is just an essential first step. Does that help explain it? You know, reconciling.
It does. And I put in the thing about common law and about a lot of people coming in. Hi everyone, please keep giving this a like. Just so anyone that's coming on, this is Nigel Howitt of the Lawful Rebel. What part of the world is it you're in again, Nigel?
I am in Hertfordshire. I'm about 30 miles north of London.
Very nice. Is that called the home county? Is that the home counties?
That is one of the home counties, indeed. It's an underestimated part of the planet.
No, it's a nice part of the world. So you had a sort of a common law experience. What's your knowledge of common law? Because people are very interested in it. Because of course the UK that doesn't have a written constitution. Some people would disagree with that. What's your take on it?
Well, my whole introduction to it was with something called the Free Man movement that, you know, was around about 10 years old, really. And it was this surge of optimism that we are really free, and you know, the state is not with all of the financial difficulties and traps, the traps of commerce. People were starting to ask questions about the nature of freedom, and they seized on the idea of common law as an alternative to the commercial law, the name, and all of that stuff happening in commerce. And I think it was a non-solution ultimately, because whatever rational justification you can offer for the non-use of force against people, the state will still use force. So, for example, in my case, challenging the state with regards to the issue of being able to live on my own land, I went to court and I was not even allowed to talk about the issue of challenging jurisdiction. So there's very much a sort of steamroller that crushing over you. So what I mean, the point here is that it's the de facto situation. So people were latching on to common law in the hope that somehow producing some paperwork or coming up with some reasoned principles could actually open that door to freedom. That we realised that was not available, through the usual avenues, as it were.
But my question would be is, what if everybody with a bit of land decided to go yurt crazy and just said, I'm going to just build yurts everywhere? So do we not need these laws in place in terms of planning to stop these things from happening? What made your situation unique?
Yeah, well, first up, I mean, yurt, shed, it could be anything. This just happens to be the structure that I'm in. I'm not necessarily into yurts. This just happens to be the headquarters of an organic small holding. So it's just the structure type that we're in. But yeah, what was unique about this case? I think the ultimate test of freedom is, can you just establish yourself on a piece of land, farmer's field, whatever you like, dig a hole in the ground, whatever you want to do, put a caravan on there, and are you allowed to carry on with it and even either succeed or fail on your own merit? And the point is that you're not allowed to do that. And this is the essence of what the planning system does. People forget that the English countryside evolved without a planning system, and it only really emerged in the form that it's in at the moment in around about 1948. So when we look at those lovely rolling hills, that they are part of the natural evolution without a government force.
Okay.
And just to further answer that question, why is this important? It's really where the issue of property rights come to the fore. And, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably aware that the issue of property rights is central to freedom. I mean, if you're free, your property rights are respected. And the only way, of course, that happens is through non-aggression. But the point is that property rights are violated through the planning laws. And there is this myth, this false belief that it's necessary. You must have these laws in place. We mustn't be able to all put up yurts or skyscrapers in our back garden. And the truth of the matter is that if there were an absolute free market in what you could or couldn't do on your own land, we wouldn't see any of these problems, which are actually a result of something different, namely a controlled planning system that's open to corruption.
I mean, I think it's a very interesting point that the argument would be, if the traffic lights as well stop tomorrow, would everybody start crashing into each other, or would they just wait and let people? Sometimes the traffic actually works better without traffic lights. So
absolutely.
But my question to you is, I've had a very successful career, obviously a very intelligent person. What about the masses that need that control? Or has it been indoctrinated into them that they have to be controlled? Because I tend to find that people that have, that very libertarian, I use that word casually, or small c conservative, it's because they themselves are quite intelligent people. They've been out there and they've done that. So how does it translate to everyday Joe?
Yeah, well, I think that everyone can acquire knowledge, and we do have this. I think it's another Duff steer out there in the Matrix, as I refer to it, using that metaphor. It's a false belief that you need to be particularly smart in order to know what's going on, and it's a question of just how far out do you zoom back, And it's an unfortunate sort of learned helplessness that people think that it's all beyond them. Thinking and knowledge gaining is a cumulative effort. Today we rest on the thinking we've done or not done yesterday and all the way back through our lives. So it's important to start thinking today and building on our knowledge. But the point is, it's very achievable. And I think if we can, sparking that curiosity, that wanting to know, and maybe coupling it with a belief that it's possible, and therein lies the challenge. I take that, and then anybody can really do it, because it's not about IQ. You don't have to grapple with 10 concepts at once. You only have to sift through things one at a time to your own understanding, to your own satisfaction of your understanding. And I think thinking our way out of the maze is possible, entirely possible for everybody.
Mara's just made a fantastic point. I want to bring this in. With such a class-based society, they could not let the plebs have the means to displace the elite and monarchy. It's quite a good point.
No, that is a good point. But I mean, I guess who you're referring to as plebs, maybe the underclass, the simply those without resources. If you were to sort of wave your wand and all of a sudden everyone was free, obviously that's quite an unrealistic scenario. But nobody would be challenged by a mass underclass if we were suddenly free. I wouldn't. I mean, we've got to be careful that premise isn't sort of sewn into that point. It's only. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying another excellent point. I'll jump in with this and then I'll let you go with this, because you can talk about it as well. Someone asked about when did the English give up their guns. What's your take on that? Should an individual be allowed gun ownership?
I don't know the answer to when that was. And in answer to the second part, it seems reasonable that we should be allowed to bear arms, but that wouldn't be one of my first fights. If we are to be free, it makes sense that I should be able to defend myself against somebody threatening my wife and children or my own life. It makes sense. But I know that's a big one for people to swallow, and therefore it seems a downstream topic. After our freedoms are perhaps realised, in a more tangible, immediate way, like with property rights being respected, being taxed less, for example, or taxed not at all. How about a government system that we paid for? I mean, there are quite. But that's going down another tangent. I'd be happy to pay for a judiciary and all these sorts of functions that you need government for. Maybe a police force to keep the peace.
Yeah. But I don't get the sense that you have crazy views. I think your views are pretty reasoned, and you see the gradualist approach to it. So say that small changes were made. Say we do leave the EU, government becomes less. Do you think you would still keep pushing and pushing and pushing?
What I will keep pushing for, David, is that everybody think. And, I'm very fascinated with the topic. I've seen how it's our techniques of thinking. Everybody thinks they know how to think. It's to start off with. It's one of those things that everybody takes for granted. You don't need anyone to show you how to think. You just can do it. And unfortunately, we have these various mental activities going on, and the question is, how efficient is it at arriving at knowledge, at achieving understanding? And I think this is really where the solution lies. So that is the message I would carry on. But I still very much think it's important for us to get out of the EU. I really think it's important for us all to mobilise towards that goal. If we have this second referendum, I think it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate our anger at being asked the same question twice, and really sort of making a big push for the door, if you like, and getting out. It is very important. And then I think some of these other issues that we've touched upon, I would rather be dealing with, one government rather than a sort of a multi-headed, 9-headed monster. I can't remember what the mythical figure's called.
You don't need to answer this if you don't want to, but how did you vote in the EU elections, or did you vote?
I didn't vote. I wasn't on the electoral register at that time,
Okay.
but I would have voted to leave.
Okay.
I would have
Okay.
definitely voted
Okay.
to leave, yeah.
And it's just people talking about criminals having guns as well, London banning knives. You want people to become more educated. What's your take on the education system then? Do your kids go to state schools, or are they homeschooled?
Yeah, my take on education is that it should be a way of life. The successful, rational man or woman would necessarily be learning something new every day of their life. So the concept of education should be taken as read to be something that we all naturally do. And following on from that, you won't be surprised to know that my children don't go to state school. They, we try and facilitate their process of becoming functionally competent in their world, as best we can. It's a big topic, home education, education itself, but to me it seems very clear that what passes for education, the idea that we need to go to school, to modern government school, this form of education, I should say, I think is actually damaging. Not only is it not providing an education, I think it's actually providing a framework of conditioning that's actually not serving us collectively. It doesn't serve human society to have a load of people that can't think. And a lot of the modern educational system actually undermines thinking. Multiple choice tests, all of this sort of thing.
Nigel, someone's made a comment. Another Nigel.
Yep.
How many live on Nigel's hippie commune?
Well, the government don't allow us to live here, but we're on 3 acres of land. We spend a lot of time here. It's a small holding. We've got animals, fruit and vegetables. So it would support, I would say, a family. Around about 2.5 to 3 acres generally supports a family, and is the limit that can be worked by a couple. So that's a sort of a broad framework. I would say for any homestead, a minimum of 2 to 3 acres, anything up to 5. So that's the amount of space that we have here. And we are not allowed to live here. The government evicted me in 2012 under pain of imprisonment, and so I'm not allowed to live here. But we spend a fair amount of time up here doing our agriculture.
So Nigel, you strike me as the kind of guy that would have been on the Mayflower, going over to America to create a new world away from the rottenness of Europe. Have you ever fancied moving somewhere else and doing something like that?
It would be nice. I mean, yes and no. I love the idea of adventure, but we're sort of adventuring into the future always. I mean, that's the way I've turned myself around to think of it. But I am quite rooted to Old Blighty, to my roots. I'm in the village that I grew up in, and I think yes, there's something very exciting, and I would have been on the Mayflower if I'd been one of those enlightened men at the time, who was going off to pursue a different way of doing things, freedom and so forth. It was all on the back of the age of reason, and the whole philosophical basis for that was the founding fathers, and I definitely would have been with them. But I think these days there's nowhere actually on the planet that where there is the potential for political freedom, so we might as well focus our best efforts at where we are. so that, and I like the surroundings, I like the English countryside, and I'm no longer an adventurer. I've done a fair bit of traveling, as you probably can gather.
No, I mean, I think what you're doing is very, very interesting, and it's very different, and that's why I'm delighted to have you on and chatting with you. And there's a lot of good comments here and people waking up, because I wouldn't like to live your life, but I'm not going to judge you. You make your choices. But the fundamental thing that binds us all is the awakening almost of people, that they're no longer going to just sit and be told what the media tells them, what the government tells them. They're starting to think for themselves, And I only think that can be a good thing, regardless of what the outcome is.
I agree completely. I think there are a lot of positive signs. I think this new media, your show, and all these other things like it on the internet are wonderful because the context is changing. It's changing very fast, and it's really great to know that people not only have access to alternate kinds of news platform like this, but also to the raw data. Almost anything you want to know of these days, anything at all. Somebody says, "Oh, how do you do that?" You can type it into Google. Bing bang bosh, it's there. It's wonderful that people are showing, as you say, that there's a demand for knowledge, for information, for truth, and it's exciting time to be alive.
But is that not worrying the government? Because you look at the amount of censorship that there is now on social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. There's been a lot of high-profile people banned and removed from them. So do you not get the sense the government is worried about what the internet is as a democratizing force, and they're trying to regulate it?
I think they probably are worried, and there's definitely people that would like to limit what is said, shall we say, and exercise censorship. But the strongest tool in our box, I think, the likes of you and I, David, and all of those thinking, inquiring listeners, is that our most powerful tool is reasoned argument. Mm-hmm. And if we fully understand the issues, if we fully get causal and we find out what causes the problems, what are the solutions, reasoned argument is that it can slice through a load of foul-smelling bullshit. It can expose the disinformation, and I think that I don't claim to be there yet, but I think the more people wise up and understand the complex issues, and the more the conversation grows, and it is, and this is really good, really exciting. I think that the rational argument is really, really key. I mean, it might sound very simplistic, and that's never going to work. And of course, irrational people won't hear a rational argument. But we can only deal with people as though they're rational, presuming they are, because that's what we have to be, us human beings. We're rational animals. It's our proper mode of functioning. So that's the one. That's the way to pursue it.
I'm just going to come into some of the comments because there's a lot of interesting chat. Everybody, please keep commenting. I'm looking at them. They come up live. I'll come into this. Mara went to LSE. She said it was, sorry, it might be a he, indoctrination in the university, brainwashing from the EU, etc. Someone's actually mentioned Bilderberg. What's your take on things like that, Nigel? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I find them interesting, but what's your take on things like Bilderberg's, Illuminati? All these secretive organizations. What's your take on them?
Well, I don't like to over-focus on them, but there is evidence for their existence. There are lots of so-called think tanks, the Royal Society, the Council on Foreign Relations. Mm-hmm. There are many of them, the Bilderberg Group, and they do exist, and they do get together and have discussions which the general public are not privy to. They do happen to be populated, these groups, by a lot of the people that are the influential members of society. So this is part of the context. This is part of the facts of reality of the world in which we live. So we can't pretend that it's not there. It's very difficult to, conspiracy theories. I think it's another one of these things we can get lost in. I think if we keep it to simple issues of knowing that we need to be free, if we are going to elect leaders, they need to be accountable. If we can understand the mechanisms of wealth creation and the fact, the very basics of how to achieve a successful life, then that's really where to focus, rather on these other issues. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
It certainly does. There's some good points. Reasoned argument is answered by milkshakes and moronic shouting. I'm sure you maybe have seen that, Tommy Robinson first had a milkshake thrown over him then Carol Benjamin, then Sargon of Akkad. Now, sorry, the same person. Now, I understand these figures are popular in some ways and hated on others. I get that. But what do you think about the tactics of the hard left, Antifa style, milkshaking people, turning up balaclavas? I mean, why do you think that's happening a lot more now, Nigel?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I mean, these are not actions of reasoning people, as you can see. I think this is all sort of a downstream effect of people's frustration, of people's false assumptions, and the more these things start to happen, I find it a bit sad, frankly. It is a sign that reasoned debate is falling on deaf ears, and it's tragic. But what's the solution to that? I don't know, but I know that reasoned argument and thinking and negotiating with people and trying to reason with them and not aggressing against them, not shouting them down. I mean, this is the approach that the rest of us have to pursue, isn't it? Because if we're to be taken seriously as we sit and discuss, reasons for Brexit, we have to be seen also to, our code of conduct has to be consistent with being, a rational thinking person, and it doesn't involve all of this throwing things at people and shouting people down, and it just sounds like charade. It sounds like a distraction from the issues, and really people should be focused on the issues.
Yeah. I think it's a very, very good point. There's some really interesting comments coming in. They're talking about the Bilderberg meeting. Mark Carney is over there right now, along with the head of GCHQ. There's the problems with London, people who get banned. Yet Farage got milkshake, Nigel. I think there's this sense that people feel they're no longer in control of their lives, which goes to the heart of what you're doing, that, these multinational corporations, the government, they're in charge. So what is your message to these people? How can they try and get some peace that they can control their own life in their own world?
Yeah, I think you've really sort of hit to the centre of it there, David. People do feel out of control, and we look up there at the big picture, on TV screens, and it's easy to feel sort of disconnected from the whole thing. I think it's important for us to zoom out and clock the big picture, be aware of what's going on. And at the same time, understanding that, that is not necessarily what we can control. And obviously what we can control is what we do and how we live our lives and how we conduct ourselves. And there's an awful lot we can do to focus on, one whole area I think is very, very fruitful for people to focus on, that's in their own interest, informing themselves, empowering themselves, is on the area of health and how to feed ourselves. Because it's not just a health issue. It's not like, oh, I like gardening, I like health, I like tiddlywinks. It's a key aspect of the world we live in, where we need to empower ourselves if we're not to suffer chronic disease and a whole barrage of things that are in epidemic proportion already, that are in exponential rise, I should say. And these things are going to affect more and more people. So this is a huge area where we can empower ourselves. And when we look out there at all the stuff that's going on that we can't do anything about, it can be a really useful balance, a really good way of feeling good about yourself if you literally know how to live on a very day-to-day basis. And of course, knowing how to feed yourself, knowing the things around the issue of health. And it's a broad topic, don't get me wrong, it's not just about eating, there's lots of things in there. But no, it's really the essence of how to live, knowing what to do on a day-to-day basis, what's poisonous for me, what supports me, and even things down to like EMFs and stuff.
A great point. Most people don't even know where their food comes from now. If you ask them where it comes from, they would say Tesco. We have lost that link with the land. We've lost that link with production and taking joy in the basic things. And that's why, depression levels amongst young people, suicide levels amongst young men are rocketing, because this false life. there's a good point. I'm going to come on to that. Somebody actually said they're loving having you on, Nigel, and they'd like you on again. Gary has said legalise cannabis. What's your take on that? What's your take on drugs?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would legalise cannabis. I think the idea of making any plant or substance, its use, a natural plant that grows in our environment on planet Earth, the idea of making it illegal or you shouldn't touch it by force is a nonsense. It really is a fundamental nonsense. And, I bring it down to our basics. Do we own our own lives? I'd like to think I own my own life, my own body, my own stuff. And I can choose what altered state of consciousness I may or may not want to indulge in. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense to think that this should be, the subject of legislation. But it connects me back to my previous point, which is it rests on a more fundamental misconception that you can enforce virtue, that you can force people to do the right thing, whatever somebody else has decided it is. So a bunch of bureaucrats decide that cannabis and all that is a bad thing for whatever twisted reasons, because it's in fact a wonderful, useful plant, as anybody who knows anything can appreciate. It's one of the most useful plants on the planet, if not the most useful. I think it's crazy. It's a crazy notion, and obviously there shouldn't be any legislation prescribing what people should or shouldn't do with their own body. Even of taking a dangerous drug, if people wanted to do that, if they valued that, it's their body, it's their life. The score. I'm sure most cannabis users probably think along those lines as well.
I mean, it's a very interesting argument. It's genuinely. It's not my politics at all. My colleague Carol I work with would admit that I'm a bit of a statist, a bit of a controller, but that's just who I am. But I find what you're saying very, very interesting, and the reason I find it interesting is I think there is a point to it, but it just seems so far away now. We're so far removed from that that it could become possible.
I can appreciate that, David. Yeah, I can appreciate that. And of course, it has to be said that the ideas of getting in a car when you're drunk or doing anything if you're under an inappropriate influence is obviously stupid, and nobody would sanction that. We're talking about what people do in their own private time and off duty and all that sort of thing. We obviously have to be careful about liability. But yeah, it is an interesting issue, isn't it? Can you sort of prescribe a rule for everyone based on some research, a group of people say, oh, this should be illegal, and we usually find out that these conclusions and policies are wrong, don't we? I mean, what was your take on the Extinction Rebellion protests and climate change? A few people are asking in the comments. Yes, well, I think climate, I mean, I think it's one of these key duff steers in, my metaphor of the Matrix, the whole mainstream story. It has huge untruths embedded in it. It's not all untrue, of course. There's just enough for it to look credible. But the whole idea that CO2 is a pollutant is bad, the whole assumption that a warming planet is bad, the whole assumption that there's not going to be enough fossil fuel, all of these assumptions, the whole argument, and it's a complex one, needs to be thoroughly, carefully and rationally picked apart to look at all the pros and all the cons, and that of course doesn't happen in the mainstream debate. So I mean, I personally, I've seen enough factual evidence to satisfy me that I think actually more carbon dioxide in the air would probably be a good thing. It's already been shown the planet's been greening over the last 30 years. People grow tomatoes and vegetables and they actually introduce carbon dioxide into greenhouses and growing spaces. It's known to be plant food. And it's just a whole big story. There's a whole point of discussion there. That's a whole show in itself. It's a whole presentation for those that know all about these things, but it's a big topic, and I think it's a duff steer, and it spills into the whole concept of environmentalism, that there's some fundamentals, philosophical assumptions at the root of the ideal that environmentalism is that need to be questioned as well. Comment from Kelly Kingdom: no way, drugs should not be legalized. How much crime is committed related to drugs? How many people have been attacked or assaulted from someone intoxicated on drugs?
And there has been studies of legalizing drugs, and I understand the argument for legalizing them. It takes away the crime aspect of it. It allows money to go into the exchequer. But my take on it is a lot of people need guidance. They need a shepherd, so to speak. So what would happen, Nigel, if we achieved this freedom, we were responsible for ourselves, and then big groups of people got high on drugs? How would it work? I get back to the argument, you're an intelligent person, you do it, but that might not apply to everybody.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just going to keep going on again.
I think that,
you might get annoyed at me saying this, but I think there's elements of communism, not communism, but communitarianism in your ideas. But on you go, there's a lot there.
Sure, yeah. Well, the first thing I'd say is the point is that making something illegal doesn't make it go away. So the fundamental point or fundamental argument against criminalizing an activity is that it doesn't work. I mean, you don't really need to know anything else. I mean, we can all talk about our philosophical background on the issue, but it just doesn't work. It's like getting a square-shaped wheel. Oh no, that doesn't work. Chuck it out. You don't really need to discuss it at length. It just doesn't work. What that's made illegal? What went away when it was criminalized? Anything? There's obviously loads of counter examples. So that alone is the justification for questioning the whole idea of criminalizing smoking cannabis. And then, of course, the second question. Okay, it's a rational thinking man's approach, and it's necessarily idealistic. And I would never make any apology for being. For wanting things to be as good as they can, as ideal as they can. I mean, there's no apologies for that. But we have to also, when we're discussing in the broader context of discussing problems and solutions, and what's your solution? And what do you think? That's what we're doing, isn't it? Discussing ideas, what would work, what would solve the problems, and I think it's just very important to take a principled approach. But also, you can't immediately sort of say, and if we sort of fast forward into your future where everything's tickety-boo, because that isn't the context we're in, and everyone would suffer a huge context shift, and they wouldn't, people can't even imagine, people don't even know what freedom is, David, let alone imagine a free society. People, it's a leap too far. So forgive, I'm not ducking answering that point, but it's very difficult to say, yes, your approach sounds like it could work, but what about, the argument from but what about?
No, I think it's interesting. And the whole point of this channel moving forward is we actually want people with alternative views and interesting alternative views. We were discussing this the other day. We're not going to have extremists on. Well, some people would maybe say you're an extremist, Nigel, but a nice extremist, a good extremist. Someone actually made a really good point. As you're a pilot, former pilot, how dangerous was it for them to fly drones? Was that something bigger than it was?
No, I think drones are probably a massive threat. I stopped flying, as I said, in 2014, and drones really took off, as it were. After that, they were not an issue while I was flying. We dealt with issues like laser lights being shined up at flight decks as we were coming into land, and things like this. But drones, I don't have any direct experience of, but they could well be a problem. I mean, it is obviously dangerous.
It's interesting. If you drink, David, stop being a hypocrite. Well, I'm going to actually say that I don't actually drink. I haven't had an alcoholic drink for 9 years. So I can get you back on that. TTT. What we'll do is we've been on nearly an hour, Nigel. We'll stay on for another few more minutes, and then we'll close things off. So tell us a wee bit more about your where you're based and some of the the people on this chat or people watching on catch up might be interested to find you, where can they find you, and what do you offer them in moving forward?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're based down here in Hertfordshire, just north of London, as mentioned. I drive the website lawfulrebel.com. I have a podcast called Living Outside the Matrix, and that's published from lawfulrebel.com. And also we run these events like the one last weekend where it's a celebration of inquiring minds, people that know that there's something deeply wrong and are looking for answers. So we're very much catering for that. I have a lot of resources on the website around the health issue. I've spent a good few years looking into that, trying to answer my own questions and sort of, becoming a father for me was important because I realized I didn't know what was good for my own body. And in terms of needing to pass that on to my children, it opened a lot of avenues, lines of inquiry. So the fruits of all of that information are presented on the website. I think health is a very, very important thing. It's one of the fundamental values that we all would pay lip service to if not act in accordance with. And it's one, as I mentioned, where we can really exercise self-mastery. It's the one area where no one's coercing you. It's the one area where we're free. I think this is really important. You're free to be as healthy as you like. And that's very, very, very empowering. It makes us feel good. So anyway, on the website, there's a lot about that. There's a lot about thinking. Thinking is my passion, as you can tell. I'm a rational, empirical-based kind of guy, and that's all on the website as well. So that's the best place to catch up with us. Sign up for our new newsletter and hear what we're about and any forthcoming events.
That's great. That's great. And did people pay to come along to the event? Was there a cost to that for the week?
Yes, there was. There was a cost. What we offer is 2 days of lectures, tea and coffee and all that sort of stuff. It's a camping venue, so we offer lunch and dinner both days as well. So you're pretty much fed and taken care of. You have to bring your own tent. But and that was all wrapping up for just over £100, and there was an early bird ticket of £80. So it was quite affordable. We weren't doing it to make an arm and a leg. It was trying to get people together, and it was very successful. And we hope to do it again. There'll be another one next year, and in fact, we're looking at doing a smaller one, possibly at the end of July, on July the 28th. So if anyone's interested and wants to make it down to Hertfordshire, July 28th, we're probably going to be doing another one. Check the website out.
A guy called Mick Brown, Nigel talks out of Matrix box. I agree with all he says. Absolutely. Someone makes the point, though, is crack acceptable for kids? There's always going to be debate and discussion. And I think the most important thing, and you've stressed this, Nigel, is we need to try and get back to just having civilised debate and discussion without the polarisation that exists now in this country, and the nastiness and the viciousness that is going on.
Yeah, it's important for us to remember that parenting is demonstrating how to live, and if we're doing it rationally, of course, we're not, provide crack cocaine anywhere near children or young people. So parents, the likes of all of us who would claim to be an adult have to sort of lead by example. And I know that's not something you can wave your magic wand and all of a sudden everyone's doing it, but it is also important for us to aspire to ideals, and that whole sort of drugs debate is one that needs to continue. It needs to be kept out in the open. People need to lead by sensible example.
No, it's very, very interesting subjects, and I mean that's been an hour we've been on, Nigel. It's just gone like that, and so many great comments and so many people on. So everybody visit lawfulrebel.com. That's your website, Nigel. And
that's the one. Yeah, do come along, check it out.
Update that. Yep. And are you on Twitter as well?
I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook as Lawful Rebel. You can find us on Facebook as Lawful Rebel. There's something published on the website every week, and there's the YouTube channel as well, Lawful Rebel TV. So come and have a look, see what we've got to offer. We're trying to spread the word and foster a larger community of thinking, inquiring people. So that's the goal.
So, Nigel, I'm just going to close up here, but you stay on though, and then I'll end the stream and I'll tell you when that's done. So, ladies and gentlemen, delighted to have Nigel Howitt on from lawfulrebel.com. We've had a great discussion. It's been very interesting. The whole purpose of UNN is to stimulate debate, to talk about big issues around Brexit, but to listen to alternative theories. We hope to have people on with different views on both the left and the right and have civilised discussion, not the way it is on mainstream media where just this general nastiness. And it's been really, really interesting tonight. So thanks again, Nigel. It's been great to have you on. And lawfulrebel.com. Yeah, everyone have checked Nigel. And it's so interesting. And we just need to open our minds. And I say this to people as well. You know, we're all mostly Brexit supporters. But, you know, understand why Remainers are the way they are. You know, maybe a bit of sympathy there. And sometimes the best way to make change is not through hard power, but sometimes through soft power, by having a conversation and getting people to open their brain. So, ladies and gentlemen, David Clues, joined by Nigel Howitt. Nigel, do you want to say goodbye?
Yep, thank you so much, David. It's been a great conversation. It's been a great pleasure to be here, and enjoy your evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nigel. Good night, everyone. We'll see you again. Take care.